The bread was still warm. 6 golden loaves of sourdough. Cooling on an oak rack. In a bakery that had been closed for 5 years. Elinor Hawthorne stood frozen in the doorway. 21 years old. An orphan since birth. She had driven 94 miles into the Blue Ridge Mountains to see a place she thought would be empty. It wasn't. The oven was warm. The fire was burning. Steam rose from 3 of the loaves. Then a young man stepped out from the back kitchen. Flour on his hands. Dark eyes. Quiet voice. "Miss Hawthorne," he said. "I've been waiting for you for 5 years." 10 days ago, she'd learned her grandmother existed. 2 days ago, she'd buried her. And somewhere behind a single brick in the oven wall, a family secret worth $4.8 million was waiting to be found. She had come here believing she had no family in this world. She had been wrong about that. Elinor Hawthorne lived above a laundromat on Franklin Street in Richmond, Virginia. 3rd floor. 1 window. A radiator that hissed like an old cat and never actually warmed the room. She was 21 years old. She worked the 6 a.m. to noon shift at a small coffee shop called the Copper Kettle. Then she went to class. Business Administration. Junior year at Virginia Commonwealth University. At night, she studied. She didn't date. She didn't have friends. Not really. There were classmates who nodded at her in the hallway. A supervisor at the coffee shop who knew her order. That was it. She had aged out of the Virginia foster care system on her 18th birthday. March 3, 2022. Before that, she had lived in 9 different homes. 9. She had counted. She had a plastic folder in her desk drawer where she kept her documents. Birth certificate. Social Security card. Foster care exit paperwork. A single photograph of a woman in a hospital bed holding a newborn. The woman was her mother. Rowena Hawthorne. Died in childbirth at Richmond Medical Center on March 3, 2004. The father's name on Elinor's birth certificate was blank. There was no grandmother listed. No family at all. Elinor had grown up believing she was alone in the world. That was the story she had been told. That was the story she had believed. Until October 6, 2025. The call came at 4:15 in the afternoon. Elinor was wiping down tables at the coffee shop. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She answered. "Miss Hawthorne?" "Yes. My name is Thaddeus Kilbride. I'm an attorney calling from Hollowbrook, Virginia. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Elinor set down the rag. "Your grandmother, Adelaide Hawthorne, passed away in her sleep on the morning of October 2nd. She was 78 years old." The coffee shop was quiet. Someone was grinding beans in the back. Elinor stood very still. "I don't have a grandmother." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Miss Hawthorne, Mr. Kilbride said gently, "You do. You did. And she has left everything for you in her will." Elinor didn't cry. She didn't cry when she hung up. She didn't cry when she took off her apron. She didn't cry on the bus home. She didn't cry when she locked the door of her apartment behind her. She sat on the edge of her bed. She looked at her hands. She had a grandmother. For 21 years. And nobody had told her. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep in foster homes. All the Christmases she had spent alone. All the birthdays where nobody had called. All that time. Somebody had been out there. Somebody with her last name. Somebody who might have loved her. She still didn't cry. She had forgotten how a long time ago. The funeral was small. October 10, 2025. A cold gray morning in the Presbyterian cemetery on the edge of Hollowbrook. Elinor stood at the back of a crowd of maybe 30 people. She wore the only black dress she owned. A thrift store dress. Over that, a heavy charcoal wool coat. The minister spoke gently. He talked about Adelaide Hawthorne's kindness. Her faith. The loaves of bread she had baked every morning at the Silverbrook Assisted Living Center, right up until the week before she died. Elinor listened. She watched the coffin lowered into the earth. She did not cry. After the service, she stood by the road, unsure where to go. An older man approached her. Silver hair. Wire-rimmed glasses on a thin black cord. "Miss Hawthorne? I'm Thaddeus Kilbride. Would you be willing to meet with me the day after tomorrow? There are things your grandmother wanted me to give you." Elinor nodded. Her voice sounded strange. Small. Like it belonged to someone else. 2 days later, she sat in Mr. Kilbride's office. Across the walnut table sat 2 women she had never met. Beatrix Ashford. 52. Tall. Sharp-featured. Silver-streaked dark hair in a chin-length bob. Tailored charcoal suit. Cartier watch. Rowena Ashford. 49. Softer. Dark brown hair pulled back, with a tortoiseshell barrette. Cream cashmere twinset. They were Elinor's first cousins once removed. The daughters of her grandmother's late younger sister. Neither of them had known she existed until Mr. Kilbride's call 10 days ago. "Miss Hawthorne," Beatrix said, her voice careful. "We are so very sorry we didn't know about you." Elinor said nothing. She looked at her hands. Mr. Kilbride opened a manila folder. "This is the last will and testament of Adelaide Marceline Hawthorne, executed on April 17, 2008. 17 years ago. Elinor had been 3 years old. To my niece Beatrix Ashford, I leave the Hawthorne family farmhouse on Marcellus Ridge Road, 40 acres of Blue Ridge woodland, and 1/2 of the Vanguard investment portfolio at present value, approximately $2,600,000. Beatrix inclined her head. To my niece Rowena Ashford, I leave the Hawthorne Charleston condominium at Battery Street, the family art collection, and the other half of the Vanguard portfolio, approximately $2,600,000. Rowena nodded once. Mr. Kilbride turned another page. He looked up over the wire-rimmed glasses. His eyes settled on Elinor. To my granddaughter, Elinor Prudence Hawthorne, I leave the property located at 747 Hollow Ridge Road, 4 miles south of Hollowbrook. The Hawthorne Bakery. 1¼ acres. The small stone and timber bakery building. The wood-fired brick oven. The attached farmhouse. And everything that is within. The room was very quiet. Elinor stared at the walnut table. A bakery. Beatrix cleared her throat softly. Mother told me she was leaving the bakery to the granddaughter. Rowena added gently, "Miss Hawthorne, that bakery has been closed since 2020. When our Aunt Adelaide had her second stroke. You're likely looking at $80,000 to $120,000 in restoration. If it would help, we could connect you with a contractor." Elinor looked at Beatrix. She looked at Rowena. Both women had steady, careful expressions. The kind people wear when they want to seem kind. Elinor didn't trust either of them. She didn't know why. Not yet. Mr. Kilbride left the room. He returned carrying 3 things. A small heavy iron key on a plain oiled cotton cord. A folded sheet of cream cotton paper. Sealed with flour cream wax. A plain business envelope tied with cotton twine. Thick. Heavy. "Your grandmother gave me these on September 15, 2008. 17 years and 1 month ago. She asked me to place them in your hand. And no one else's. Elinor hung the cord around her neck. She tucked the letter and the envelope into her coat pocket. Beatrix said, "Miss Hawthorne, would you have dinner with us next week? We'd like to know you." Elinor looked up. Something in her chest tightened. "I'll think about it." That wasn't a yes. But she said it anyway. Because sometimes you say yes when you mean maybe. Because sometimes you say maybe when you mean no. Because sometimes you say nothing at all. Her car was a silver Honda Civic. 20 years old. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time. Then she started the car. The road wound up into the mountains. The trees were on fire. Not really. But that's what October in Virginia looked like. Orange. Crimson. Deep burnished gold. At the base of a narrow gravel track, she stopped. A hand-painted sign was nailed to a fence post. Hawthorne Bakery. EST 1898. She turned onto the track. Drove up. Parked at the top. Got out. The air was different up here. Cleaner. Colder. Smelling of pine and whetstone. And something else. Something warm. Something like bread. She walked to the front door. Stone and timber. A heavy iron padlock. She took the key from around her neck. Slid it in. The padlock turned. She lifted the hasp. She pushed open the door. The bread was still warm. 6 golden loaves. Cooling on an oak rack. Along the west wall. Steam rising faintly from 3 of them. The smell of yeast and hickory smoke and buttermilk filled the room. Elinor stood in the doorway. She could not move. Her mind was doing that thing minds do when something impossible happens. It was refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. Because the bakery had been closed for 5 years. Because nobody was supposed to be here. Except Miss Hawthorne. The voice came from a doorway at the north end of the bakery. Elinor spun around. A young man. Tall. Lean. 25. Dark hair a little too long. A gray wool sweater dusted with flour. His hands dusted too. His eyes were dark and quiet and tired. He did not smile. "Miss Hawthorne. I've been waiting for you for 5 years." Elinor took a step back. She hit the doorframe. "Who are you?" "My name is Silas Redmond." "Why are you in my grandmother's bakery?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at her. Really looked. Like he was checking to see if she was real. "Because your grandmother asked me to be." He heated soup on the wood stove. Navy bean. Her grandmother's recipe. He set a small ceramic bowl in front of her at the long wooden counter. 2 thick slices of warm sourdough. A crock of damson plum jam. A mug of buttermilk. She had never had buttermilk before. She drank it anyway. She ate the bread. It was the best bread she had ever eaten. Silas sat across the counter on a tall pine stool. He didn't eat. He just watched her, quietly. Like a man who had waited 5 years to see someone eat bread. When she finished, he stood up. "There's a room in the farmhouse. Off the east hallway. The bed is made up. Your grandmother's own wool blanket is on it. She always said that was your bed. She said it every day for 5 years." Elinor set down the mug. "She said that?" "Every day." He put on a worn brown Carhartt coat. At the door, he stopped. He didn't turn around. "Miss Hawthorne. I know how strange this is. If you want me to leave in the morning, I'll leave. I only ask that you read the letter your grandmother wrote you, before you decide." Then he was gone. She heard the low rumble of an old truck. Headlights swept across the front windows. Then silence. Elinor sat at the small heart pine kitchen table. She lit a brass kerosene lantern. She worked the flour cream wax loose with her thumbnail. She unfolded the letter. The handwriting was slow. Careful. The handwriting of a woman who had once been strong and had learned to write again after a stroke. "My Elinor. I am not a woman of many words. Your grandfather Ezra was the word keeper of this family, and when we lost him in 2003, I think most of the words went with him. I am writing this on April 17, 2008. 3 months after the Hollowbrook County Juvenile Court told me that any further custody petitions I filed for you would be dismissed with prejudice. You are 4 years old today, my Elinor. You are living with a foster family in Richmond. Their name is Whitcomb. I am not permitted to write to you. I am not permitted to visit. I am not permitted to attend your kindergarten graduation next year. I am not permitted to send you a birthday card in March. The court has been very clear. If I attempt contact, they will interpret it as harassment. I need you to know something, my Elinor. In case you ever read this. I did not choose to lose you. I fought for you. 3 petitions. Each denied. I was 61 years old. I had just had a small stroke. I lived alone. I had a wood-fired oven the court called a fire hazard. The court said I was not a fit guardian. I know I was fit to love you. But I could not prove that in a courtroom. So I stopped fighting in the courtroom. And I started fighting in a different way. Elinor's hand shook. I am leaving you the bakery. Not the farmhouse in Charleston. Not the family art. Not the investment portfolio. Just the bakery. Because the bakery is what our family has been for since 1898. What my grandmother Cordelia built, with her own hands. What your grandfather Ezra and I built our life around. Where you were meant to grow up. If you find a young man at the bakery, when you arrive, please be gentle with him. His name is Silas Redmond. He came to us in the winter of 2019, with nothing but a canvas bag and a hunger I recognized. I have asked him to keep the fire going for me. Until you come home. He has been alone, with the fire for a long time. Your grandmother, Adelaide Marceline Hawthorne. Elinor laid the letter flat. She did not cry. She reached for the plain business envelope. She untied the cotton twine. Inside were folded sheets of cream cotton paper. 260 of them. Every one was addressed on the front in the same slow, careful handwriting. To my Elinor, wherever you are. 1 letter for every Sunday of the last 5 years. Her grandmother had written her a letter every Sunday afternoon for 5 years. She had never mailed any of them. She read the last letter. Dated September 28, 2025. 4 days before Adelaide had died. My Elinor. I baked a loaf of sourdough for you this morning. I gave it to the daughter of Mrs. Maribel in room 218. Her daughter is a nurse at Santara Martha Jefferson Hospital. I told her the loaf was for my granddaughter Elinor. She thanked me. She took the loaf. I hope some of the loaves I have baked for you have reached you. Your grandmother, Adelaide. Elinor laid the letter flat next to the first one. She did not cry. She sat at the small kitchen table in the warm gold of the kerosene lantern for a long time. Her grandmother's handwriting on the table in front of her. Her grandmother's blanket on the bed in the next room. Her grandmother's key on the cord around her neck. Her grandmother's bread cooling in the bakery. And somewhere down the mountain, a young man in a Carhartt coat was driving home in an old truck. To sleep for a few hours. Before coming back at 4 in the morning. To start a fire she now understood he had been tending for 5 years. For a granddaughter he had never met. Elinor stood up. She walked to the bedroom. She lay down on the narrow bed her grandmother had kept made up for her. She pulled the wool blanket up to her chin. She stared at the ceiling. She was still awake at 3:52 in the morning, when she heard the low rumble of an old truck coming slowly up the gravel track. She got out of bed. She dressed in jeans and a heavy cream cable knit sweater. She walked out through the small covered breezeway. Silas was already in the bakery, kneeling in front of the open firebox, feeding hickory splits onto the coals. He looked up. "Good morning, Miss Hawthorne." "Elinor," she said. He nodded. "Good morning, Elinor." She walked to the counter. "Show me how to knead the dough." He stood up, wiped his hands. "Yes, ma'am." Then, softer, almost to himself, "She said you'd come." The first morning, Elinor burned her hand. Not badly. Just a red mark across her knuckles. Silas ran cold water over a cotton cloth. Handed it to her. She pressed it to her hand. "Thank you. You'll burn yourself more than once." "Everyone does." "Did you?" "Twice a week. For the first year." She almost smiled. Almost. She didn't quite know how anymore. She had planned to stay a week. She called her academic advisor on the second morning. Just a week. To sort things out. Her advisor was surprisingly kind. Elinor had never asked for anything before. "Take 3 weeks if you need to. I'll email your professors." Elinor almost said no. Then she said, "Thank you." Then she hung up. She stood in the small farmhouse kitchen. She had just accepted 3 weeks of leave from a school she had worked 2 jobs to attend. For a bakery she hadn't decided to keep. For a stranger she barely knew. She didn't understand herself. She didn't try to. By the 4th morning, she could shape a loaf. Not well. But she could. Silas stood next to her at the counter and showed her how. Fold the dough. Press the heel of your hand down and away. Quarter turn. Press again. "It tells you," he said. "You have to listen with your hands." "That doesn't make sense." "It will." She glanced sideways at him. His hands moved slowly. Deliberately. "How did she teach you?" Silas didn't look up. "Same way I'm teaching you." "You made that up." "I did not." "You just repeat what she said?" "Word for word. Every day for a year. Until I could do it, without hearing her voice." "And now?" He was quiet a moment. "Now I still hear it." The days settled into a rhythm. 4 a.m., Silas arriving in the old truck. The soft crackle of the firebox coming alive. Elinor pulling on her sweater, walking through the breezeway, kneading dough under the warm gold light of the kerosene lantern. The first bake at 6. The smell of hickory smoke and yeast filling the bakery. Coffee on the back stove. The sun climbing over the ridge. She would sit on the small covered porch, with a tin mug in her hands, and watch the mist lift off the mountains. She had never seen mountains like this. She had grown up in a city. She hadn't known the world could be this quiet. She hadn't known she could be this quiet inside herself. Silas told her about his mother on the 6th morning. He wasn't looking at her when he said it. "My mother died when I was 15. Elinor stopped what she was doing. "How?" "Overdose. She'd been trying to get clean. She almost made it." "I'm sorry." "Yeah." "Your father?" "Left when I was 2. Don't remember him." "Where did you go?" "After your mother?" "Stayed home in Wheeling." Aged out at 18. Bounced around. Kentucky. Tennessee. West Virginia. Ended up here. Why here? Silas was quiet a long time. I had a reason. He turned to the sink. Ran water. Washed his hands. Elinor watched his back. She wanted to ask. She didn't. Because she knew what it was like to have a reason you didn't want to say out loud yet. She started reading the letters. At night. In the farmhouse kitchen. Under the kerosene lantern. Sometimes only one a night. Sometimes 6. My Elinor. Mrs. Kestrel visited your 4th grade classroom this week. She reports that you have grown 2 inches since summer. She reports that you struggled on a math quiz, but that your teacher said you tried very hard. That is what matters. You have always tried very hard, my Elinor. Even as an infant, you tried. Elinor set the letter down. She thought about all the times she had cried herself to sleep in that 4th grade year. She thought about the foster mother, who had told her she was stupid because she couldn't do long division. She thought about how nobody had come. Except somebody had come. Somebody had come every Sunday. Somebody had written her a letter. Somebody had known. She read another letter. She read another. By the end of the first week, she had read 43. By the end of the second, she had read 91. She was still not crying. But something in her ribs was loosening. Slowly. Like dough proving. Silas made her laugh on the 10th day. She was carrying a tray of shaped loaves, and she stepped in a wet spot on the flagstone floor. The tray hit the counter. The loaves went everywhere. She landed on her backside on the hard oak floor, with a small, undignified thud. Silas looked up from across the room. You okay? I don't know. Anything broken? My pride. He set down the peel. He walked over. He stood above her, with his hands on his hips. Very seriously, he said, the good news is we can reshape them. Elinor looked up at him. Then she laughed. She actually laughed. A small, surprised, rusty laugh, like a hinge that hadn't been oiled in years. Silas's mouth twitched. His eyes softened. He extended a hand. She took it. He pulled her to her feet. His hand was warm and rough and dusted with flour. He let go. Not too quickly. But quickly enough. Elinor bent to gather the loaves. She could feel her cheeks warm. She told herself it was the heat from the oven. Beatrix called on the 12th day. Elinor was in the flour cellar. Elinor, darling, how are you settling in? I'm fine. Have you had a chance to think about our conversation from last week? Which one? About the property, dear. Elinor closed her eyes. Beatrix. I'm not selling. Elinor. I understand this is a lot. But I'd like to make you an offer. From me personally. 150,000. For a property that needs 100,000 in restoration? Well, dear. Beatrix. Yes? No. Elinor. I said no. She hung up. She stood in the cool dark of the flour cellar. Her heart was beating fast. She had never told anyone no before. Not like that. Not without an apology. She was 21 years old, and she had just told her cousin, in 3 words, that the answer was no. She waited for the guilt to come. It didn't come. Something else came instead. A small, hot, quiet feeling in the middle of her chest. Anger. She was angry that Beatrix hadn't asked her once, in 12 days, whether she was okay. Whether she needed anything. Who she was. Beatrix wanted the land. Beatrix had always wanted the land. She walked back upstairs. Silas looked up. You okay? No. My cousin just offered me $150,000 for the property. What did you say? I said no. Silas nodded. Good. That was all. Just one word. But it made something in her steady. 3 days later, a letter came. Heavy cream stationery. Washington, D.C. Return address. Meridian Development Partners. Dear Ms. Hawthorne, we represent a private investment group interested in acquiring rural properties for the purpose of developing a boutique luxury resort. We are prepared to offer you $800,000 for the property, closing within 30 days. Elinor read the letter twice. She sat down on the porch step. $800,000. More money than she had ever seen. She stared at the letter. She thought about how quickly it had come. 3 days after she told Beatrix no. She did not believe in coincidences. Not anymore. She showed the letter to Silas that evening. He read it slowly. What are you thinking? I'm thinking somebody told them about me. Silas was quiet. Then he said, your grandmother left something for you. In case something like this ever happened. Where? He walked to the back. Opened a small oak cabinet above the sink. On the top shelf, behind a row of stoneware crocks, was a small wooden box. He brought it down. Inside was a folded sheet of cream cotton paper. Elinor unfolded it. Her grandmother's handwriting. If someone comes to buy this land, do not sign anything. A man came to see me in 2016. His name was Wexford. He offered me $200,000 for this land. I told him no. He came back 3 more times. I told him no 3 more times. Then he stopped coming. And a year later my niece Beatrix telephoned me. She asked me if I had considered selling. I understood that day, my Elinor, that some people do not stop trying. They only find other people to try for them. If someone offers you money for this land, and if that offer comes soon, after someone in this family has made you feel small, know this. The land is not for sale. It has never been for sale. Trust the young man baking your bread. He knows. Elinor folded the note. She looked at Silas. He said, she told me about the man from Washington. She said if he ever came back, I was to say the same thing she'd said. 3 times. Which was? The land is not for sale. Elinor nodded. I have a friend at school. Delphine. She works at a corporate research firm. I'm going to have her look into Meridian. Silas raised an eyebrow. I'm not the girl I was when I got here. Silas said, I know. Delphine called back the next afternoon. Meridian Development Partners? Interesting shell. Small office in D.C. Their referral log for Virginia has one name, from the last 6 months. Whose? Beatrix Ashford. 15% commission on closing. Which, on $800,000, is $120,000 for her. Elinor closed her eyes. She sat down on a sack of flour in the cool dark cellar. She was 21 years old, and she had a cousin, who was trying to sell her grandmother's land out, from under her. She wanted to hate Beatrix. She could not. Not yet. She was going to sit on this. She was going to think. She was going to do it right. That evening on the porch, Silas asked, what are you going to do? Nothing. Yet. You're not going to confront her? Not yet. Why not? Because I want to understand her first. Silas looked at her. Why? Elinor was quiet. Because I've spent my whole life on the outside of a family. And now I have 2 cousins. And one of them is trying to sell my grandmother's land. And I want to know why, before I close the door." Silas didn't say anything. There was a softness in his face she hadn't seen before. She looked away. The mountains were black against the dark blue sky. She said, quietly, "Why did you stay here for 5 years?" "I told you. Your grandmother asked me to." "That's not a whole answer." "I know. So what's the whole answer?" He was quiet a long time. "I'll tell you. But not tonight." "Why not tonight?" "Because it's the kind of thing you tell someone once. And I want to tell it to you, when you're ready to hear it." "How will you know when I'm ready?" "I'll know." She turned back to the mountains. Something inside her chest was doing something she didn't have a word for. There was a storm that Saturday night. Thunder rolling down the ridge. The power went out at 9:30. Elinor was in the farmhouse when the lights died. She heard boots on the breezeway. "Silas." He carried a kerosene lantern. "Power's out. Whole ridge is dark. Should you drive down? Roads are bad. You'll freeze in the shed." "I've done it before." Elinor stood up. "You can stay in the farmhouse. There's the couch." Silas hesitated. "It's not proper." "Silas." "Yes?" "You've been baking my bread at 4 a.m. for 5 years. I think we're past proper." He almost smiled. He nodded. They sat at the kitchen table by the light of the lantern. Tea on the wood stove. He drank his black. She drank hers with honey. The rain hit the roof. Loud. Steady. She said, "Silas." "Yeah." "Why did you stay?" "Because your grandmother was the first person who ever called me by my name and didn't wince." "But it's not the whole answer." He was quiet. "I owed her." "For what?" "For saving my life. When she found you sleeping behind the bakery." "Before that." Elinor set her tea down. "What do you mean before that?" Silas looked at his hands. "Not tonight, Elinor. Please." She saw something in his face that stopped her. Not fear. Grief. Something old. "Okay." They sat in the warm gold of the lantern, with the rain hammering the roof. After a while, Silas said, "Elinor." "Yeah." "You said something last week. On the porch. About being on the outside of a family your whole life." "I remember. I know what that feels like." "I know you do. But you're not on the outside anymore." Her breath caught. He looked at her. "You're right here. On your grandmother's land. And I've been baking your bread for 5 years. And I'm still here." Elinor didn't say anything. She couldn't. "You're inside now." "That's what I'm saying." Her eyes stung. For the first time in a very long time. She did not cry. But she nodded. "Small." He nodded back. They didn't say anything else. Until the tea went cold. And they went to sleep. Him on the couch. Her in her grandmother's bed. 2 days later, she opened her grandmother's last letter. Not the one dated September 28th. The one folded inside it. The one she hadn't unfolded yet. She hadn't been ready. She was ready now. She sat at the heart pine table. On the reverse side was a small hand-drawn map. A rough sketch of the exterior wall of the wood-fired brick oven. The arched loading door. The rows of brick. A small red X on one specific brick. 3rd row up from the bottom. 4th from the left. Beneath the map. "My Elinor. Bring the young man baking your bread." He knows the story too. There is something behind this brick that belongs to you. It has been waiting a long time. Longer than I have been waiting for you. Elinor sat with the map in her hand. She stood up. She walked out through the breezeway. Silas looked up. He saw her face. He set down the peel. What? She held out the map. He took it. He read it. She told me. About the brick. But she didn't tell you what was behind it. She said only her granddaughter could open it. They walked to the oven. Elinor counted from the bottom. 1 row. 2 rows. 3 rows. From the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. She put both her hands on the 4th brick. She pushed. For a moment, nothing. Then the brick swung inward. Smoothly. On a small hand-forged iron pivot. Behind it, a small stone chamber. Warm from the constant heat of the oven fire. Inside was a cedar-lined chest. 12 inches long. 8 inches deep. The lid stamped in worn block letters. Cordelia. 1898. Elinor lifted it out. She set it on the counter. She lifted the lid. Inside were coins. Wrapped in oiled cotton paper. Gold. Old. Beneath the coins was a leather-bound notebook. Beneath the notebook was a photograph. Beneath the photograph was a folded sheet of cotton paper. Yellowed at the edges. She unfolded the paper. The date at the top was April 17, 1945. She read the first line. I, Cordelia Marceline Hawthorne, master baker of the Hawthorne Bakery on Hollow Ridge Road, on this the 17th day of April, 1945, freely promise the 47 families of this county, whose winter tables I have this year supplied, without payment through the coldest winter these mountains have seen in 50 years. Elinor stopped reading. Her hand was shaking. Silas was watching her. She whispered, Silas. What is this? Your family. For how long? 80 years. She sat down on the flagstone. Right there. Beside the oven. She held the paper in both hands. She looked up at Silas. He was on one knee beside her. I don't understand. You will. How long have you known about this? 5 years. Why didn't you tell me? Because she said only you could open it. Elinor reached for the photograph. Sepia. A woman in a leather apron standing beside a small girl at a wood-fired brick oven. The woman had her hand on the girl's shoulder. On the back, in faded ink. Cordelia and Adelaide. Summer 1948. Adelaide is 4. She has just learned to shape her first loaf. Elinor pressed her hand over her mouth. She made a small sound. A sound she had never made before. Silas didn't say anything. He just stayed there. On one knee. Beside her. After a long moment, she said, Silas. Yeah. You said I would know, when I was ready. To hear the whole answer. Yes. Am I ready now? He looked at her. His eyes were dark and quiet and steady. Almost. When? Soon. Promise. I promise. She sat on the flagstone floor beside her great-great-grandmother's chest, and she believed him. Elinor sat on the flagstone floor for a long time. The chest beside her. The paper in her hands. The photograph on her lap. Silas didn't move. After a while she said, I need to write a letter. To who? The National Trust for Rural Heritage. And the Southern Appalachian Baking Archive at Chapel Hill. And a private foundation I read about last year, that preserves living craft traditions. All right. And I need to make copies of everything, before I send anything. Silas nodded. She looked up at him. Am I crazy? No. Silas, this is. I know what it is. You know? Your grandmother told me. 3 years ago. She said if you ever came home. If you ever opened the chest. Then you would know what to do. And she said I was to help you do it. Elinor stared at him. She trusted me to know. Yeah. But she'd never met me. She knew you. Better than you think. She wrote the letters that afternoon. Cream cotton paper. Her grandmother's fountain pen. She said she was the great-great-granddaughter of Cordelia Marceline Hawthorne. She said she had come home to a bakery that had been continuously operated for 127 years. She said she had recently discovered a family record from 1945. She signed her name. Elinor Prudence Hawthorne. Hawthorne Bakery. Hollow Ridge Road. Hollowbrook, Virginia. She drove down the mountain in the silver Civic. She slid the envelopes through the brass slot of the small post office on Main Street. She drove back up. She did not tell Beatrix. She did not tell Rowena. She did not tell anyone. 3 weeks passed. The bakery went on. The 4 a.m. fires. The morning bakes. The mist on the ridge. Elinor started to think maybe she had been foolish. Then, on a bright cold Tuesday in early November, a climate-controlled van came slowly up the gravel track. Behind it, a sedan with the seal of the National Trust for Rural Heritage. Behind that, a car from the Southern Appalachian Baking Archive. Behind that, a pickup truck. Elinor was on the porch when they came around the bend. She stood up. She wiped flour off her hands. She said, quietly, to no one, they came. They were 4. Dr. Miriam Ashcott, Senior Curator of the National Trust for Rural Heritage. 67. Silver hair. Dr. Elias Papenrath, Southern Appalachian Baking Archive. 64. A heavy dark gray coat. Dr. Coralie Trumbull, Regional Director of the Blue Ridge Cultural Foundation. 71. A long burgundy wool cape. And a 4th man. Dr. Ezekiel Amberton. 63. From the Southern Rural Heritage Program at Chapel Hill. When he stepped onto the gravel, he stood still for a moment. He looked at the bakery. Then he looked past it. At the ridge. The pines. He took off his hat. He held it against his chest. He said, quietly, my grandfather told me about this place. I never thought I'd stand on this ground. Elinor didn't understand. Not yet. She led them inside. They moved through the bakery slowly. Reverently. Elinor showed them the 4th brick in the 3rd row. She swung it inward. She showed them the cedar-lined chest. Cordelia's notebook. The coins. The photograph. The folded promise. Dr. Papenrath read the promise aloud. I, Cordelia Marceline Hawthorne, Master Baker of the Hawthorne Bakery on Hollow Ridge Road in Hollowbrook County, Virginia, on this the 17th day of April, 1945, freely promise the 47 families of this county, whose winter tables I have this year supplied, without payment, that I will continue to deliver a fresh loaf of Hawthorne sourdough, and a fresh sack of hand-milled heirloom cornmeal to each family every autumn at no charge for, as long as my hands can still knead a dough, and my oven can still hold a fire. Below Cordelia's signature were 3 more. I, Ezra Hawthorne, on the 17th day of April, 1970, at the age of 25, under the hand of my mother Cordelia, undertake the same promise, upon her passing. I, Adelaide Marceline Hawthorne, on the 17th day of April, 1995, at the age of 48, under the hand of my husband Ezra, undertake the same promise, upon his passing. I, Adelaide Marceline Hawthorne, on the 17th day of April, 2008, at the age of 61, under my own hand alone, hold this promise in trust for my granddaughter Elinor Prudence Hawthorne, aged 4 years and 1 month, until such time as she may return to this bakery to sign in her own hand. For generations of signatures. 80 years across those names. Dr. Papenrath lowered the paper. His eyes were wet. Then Dr. Amberton spoke. My grandfather was one of the 47. Elinor turned to him. My grandfather was born in 1938. He grew up in these mountains. He always told us that when he was 7 years old, in the winter of 1945, his family had nothing. No coal. No food. His father had been killed in a mine collapse the year before. His mother had 4 children under 12. He paused. He said a woman came to their cabin every Sunday of that winter. She brought a loaf of bread and a sack of cornmeal. And she never asked their name. She just left it on the step. He looked at Elinor. He said it was the only reason they lived. Elinor stood very still. He told that story to my father. My father told it to me. I told it to my children. It is the story our family tells at Thanksgiving. About a woman on a mountain who fed us when no one else would. He looked around the bakery. I did not know her name. My grandfather did not know her name. He looked at Elinor. Her name was Cordelia Hawthorne. Elinor could not speak. Silas was watching her from behind the counter. His face was very still. They sat at the counter that afternoon. Dr. Ashcott spoke first. Miss Hawthorne. What you have here is one of the most significant artifacts of Southern rural baking heritage that any of us have encountered. The unbroken continuity of the bakery. The 80-year promise. The 4 generations of signatures. The 1898 methodology notebook. And the fact that the promise has been kept continuously, even during your grandmother's incapacitation, by a young man who has been baking bread here for 5 years. She looked at Silas. Then back at Elinor. Our 3 institutions have consulted with a private philanthropic foundation that specializes in living heritage preservation. Together, we would like to establish this bakery as a living archive. And we would like to compensate you for the historical value of what your family has kept. Elinor said, compensate how? Dr. Ashcott looked at her colleagues. They nodded. $4.8 million. Funded jointly. Wired within 30 days. In exchange for full documentation rights, cataloging of the artifacts, and the establishment of the bakery as a partnered heritage site. You retain full ownership and full operating control. The words did not land at first. Elinor heard them the way you hear a sound underwater. Silas was staring at her. I'm sorry. Can you say that again? Dr. Papenrath said, gently, $4.8 million, Miss Hawthorne. Elinor sat down on a stool. She held the counter with one hand. For a bakery. Dr. Trumbull said, for a legacy. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat at the heart pine table under the kerosene lantern. She stared at the promise. Signed 1945. Signed 1970. Signed 1995. Signed 2008. Waiting for her signature. $4,800,000. She kept saying it in her head. She could pay off school. She could buy a house. She could travel. She could do anything. She was 21 years old, and she could do anything. Except she wasn't sure she wanted any of it for herself. She didn't know what she wanted. She thought about the letters. 260 of them. She thought about the loaves at Silverbrook. She thought about foster homes. 9 of them. She thought about Silas. Sleeping in a shed for 5 years. She thought about 47 families. She wrote a list. By the kerosene lantern. On a sheet of cream cotton paper. She thought maybe she was writing the rest of her life. At 3 a.m., there was a knock at the farmhouse door. Elinor froze at the table. She opened it. Silas. His face was pale. His eyes were red. I couldn't wait until morning. Come in. He stood in the small kitchen. I have to tell you something. Before you sign anything tomorrow. Okay. He didn't sit down. My grandfather's name was Josiah Redmond. Elinor's breath stopped. He was born in these mountains. In 1938. His father died in a mine collapse in 1944. Elinor put her hand on the back of a chair. In the winter of 1945, when he was 7, his mother had nothing. He had 3 sisters. There was no coal. There was no food. His mother sold her wedding ring for a bag of potatoes. Elinor whispered, Silas. Every Sunday of that winter, someone left a loaf of bread and a sack of cornmeal on their front step. His mother never saw who. She said the person always came before dawn. Elinor sat down. My grandfather told my father. My father told me. When I was 9 years old. It was the only story my father ever told me that felt true. Silas swallowed. My father drank. He was not a good man. When my mother died, I was 15. He didn't come to the funeral. I don't know where he is now. Elinor's eyes were burning. When I was 16, my grandfather was dying. In a nursing home in Wheeling. He asked me to come see him. He held my hand. He said, Silas. If you ever lose your way, find the Blue Ridge Mountains. Find a place called Hollowbrook. Find a family named Hawthorne. They saved us. You go there. Silas's voice broke. They saved us, he said. You go there. Elinor was crying now. She didn't know when it had started. She had not cried like this in 21 years. I lost my way, Elinor. I lost it for a long time. I came here, when I was 20, because I remembered my grandfather's face, when he said it. I came here, because he told me they saved us. He wiped his eyes. Your grandmother saw me the first morning. She brought me inside. She fed me. She asked me my last name, after 2 months. When I said Redmond, she sat down at the counter. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Silas. Was your grandfather's name Josiah? I said yes. She said, I met him once. When he was very small. In the winter of 1945. My mother took me with her one Sunday. She brought a loaf to a cabin. There was a boy in the doorway. Silas's shoulders shook. She said, Silas. I have been waiting for someone from that cabin to come back. For 75 years. Elinor stood up. She crossed the kitchen. She put her arms around him. She held him. She was crying, and he was crying, and they stood in the small farmhouse kitchen under the kerosene lantern, and they held each other, because there were no words that were enough. After a long time, he said into her hair, I didn't tell you before because I was afraid you would think I stayed for the money. I stayed for her. And then I stayed because I was afraid to leave. And then I stayed because you came home. Elinor pulled back. She looked at his face. You stayed because a promise came back around. Yeah. And now it's mine. Yeah. Silas. Yes. I know what to do now. The next morning, before the visitors returned, she drove down the mountain. To Silverbrook Assisted Living Center. She walked in her canvas apron, and her cream sweater, and her boots still dusted with flour. My name is Elinor Hawthorne. My grandmother was Adelaide Hawthorne. She lived here for 5 years. The receptionist's face changed. Oh, honey. Oh, honey. Sit down. Let me get someone. An older woman came out. Silver hair. Warm dark eyes. Her name tag said Wilma. You came. Yes. Come with me, sweetheart. There's something we've been keeping. For you. The staff kitchen was small. On a high shelf above the sink was a tin box. Wilma took it down. Your grandmother baked in this kitchen every morning. She would come down at 3:30. She would bake one loaf. It took her 40 minutes. She would take it out here at 4:15. Every single morning. For 5 years. Elinor stood beside her. She could smell the ghost of yeast in the room. Every morning she would carry the loaf to a resident's room. Or she would leave it for a staff member. She would say the same sentence every time. Do you know what she would say? Elinor whispered, "This one is for my granddaughter Elinor." Wilma's eyes filled. Yes, honey. Every single morning. How many was that? Sweetheart. 5 years, every single morning. That's 1,825 loaves. Elinor put her hand over her mouth. Wilma opened the tin box. Inside were slips of paper. Different colors. Different handwriting. Every time she gave a loaf away, she asked the person to write their name and the date. She said she wanted a record. She said she wanted to know that even if they hadn't reached you directly, someone had eaten something baked by a woman who loved you. Elinor picked up a handful of the slips. Some dated 2020. Some 2022. Some 2025. The last one was dated September 30th, 2025. 2 days before her grandmother had died. Karen Maribel. Physical therapist. This loaf is for Elinor. Elinor sat down on a small step stool. She held the slips of paper against her chest. And she cried the way she had never cried in her life. Loud. Without shape. Without shame. The grief of 21 years coming out all at once. Wilma sat down beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. She loved you, honey. She loved you every single morning. 1,825 mornings. She loved you, and she loved you, and she loved you. Elinor cried and Wilma held her, and outside the window the November sun rose over Hollowbrook. She went to see Beatrix that afternoon. 2 hours through the mountains. The tin box on the passenger seat. Cordelia's promise folded in her coat pocket. Beatrix's house was a Georgian colonial on a street of Georgian colonials. Beatrix opened the door in a cashmere sweater. Her face changed when she saw Elinor. Elinor. Sweetheart. What a surprise. Elinor didn't come in. She stood on the doorstep. Beatrix. I know about Meridian Development Partners. I know about the referral fee. I know you brought them to me. Beatrix's face went still. Elinor. I can explain. I'm not here for an explanation. Then what? I'm here to tell you that I know. And I'm not selling the land. And I'm not going to sue you. And I'm not going to tell Rowena. Beatrix stared at her. Why not? Because you're the only cousin I have. And I don't have very many people. And I'd rather have you as family than be right. Beatrix opened her mouth. She closed it. Her eyes filled. Elinor. I brought you something. Elinor took a slip of paper from her coat pocket. One of the slips from the tin box. The name on it was Beatrix Ashford. Dated November 24th, 2022. Thanksgiving Day. This loaf is for Elinor. You visited her once. On Thanksgiving. She gave you a loaf of bread that morning. Do you remember? Beatrix's face crumpled. Oh God. Oh God, Elinor. She told you the loaf was for me. She told everyone. Every day. For 5 years. Beatrix put her hand over her mouth. She was crying now. Silently. The way people cry when they cannot afford to sound like it. Elinor said, I'm going to keep the promise Cordelia made in 1945. I'm going to keep feeding those families. And I want you to come home for Thanksgiving. Both of you. I'll bake the bread. Beatrix reached out. Grabbed her hand. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. 2 days later, the wire cleared. $4.8 million. Elinor sat in the office of Mrs. Marlowe at the Hollowbrook County Bank. Mrs. Marlowe was 60. She had known Adelaide. Elinor said, I want to set up 3 accounts. Yes, ma'am. $800,000 into an operating account for the bakery. For restoration and modernization. And to pay a proper salary to Silas Redmond for the next 20 years. Retroactive to 2020. Mrs. Marlowe wrote. $1 million into a trust. Called the Hawthorne Bakery Promise Trust. It funds the annual delivery of bread and cornmeal to 100 families in Hollowbrook County. In perpetuity. Mrs. Marlowe wrote. $3 million into a scholarship endowment. The Adelaide Marceline Hawthorne Scholarship. For young women aging out of the Virginia foster care system, who want to pursue higher education. Full tuition. Room. Board. Books. A mentor. And a monthly letter, from me personally, for as long as I am living. Mrs. Marlowe stopped writing. She looked up. Her eyes filled. Your grandmother would be proud of you, honey. I hope so. She stayed at the bakery through Thanksgiving. Beatrix and Rowena came. They stayed 4 days. On the last morning, at the long counter, Elinor said, Thank you for coming. Beatrix said, Elinor. We should have come 20 years ago. Rowena said, We should have. Elinor said, You're here now. She went back to Richmond in January. She finished her junior year. She finished her senior year. She commuted between the city and the mountain. She graduated with her business administration degree in the spring of 2027. Silas drove her to Richmond for the ceremony. She wore a plain black gown over a cream cotton dress. She walked across the stage. She took her diploma. In the audience, Silas. Beatrix. Rowena. Wilma. 4 people. 4 was enough. She moved permanently to the bakery that June. She and Silas ran it together. He baked. She managed. She modernized without changing what mattered. Online orders. Weekend workshops. A partnership with the local high school, where students could earn credit learning heritage baking. Every autumn, they loaded the old truck. They delivered a loaf of sourdough and a sack of cornmeal to every one of the 100 families. They drove together. They didn't talk much on those drives. They didn't need to. She and Silas married on April 17, 2028. On the porch of the bakery. The same day she signed the promise. She had asked Beatrix to walk her down the aisle. Because that's what family is. Not the family you have. The family you build. The ceremony was small. Silas cried when he saw her. He tried not to. He couldn't help it. You waited for me, she said at the altar. I always would have. I know. After the vows, they walked together to the heart pine desk in the bakery. Cordelia's promise lay unfolded on the desk. Under Cordelia's signature. Under Ezra's. Under Adelaide's from 1995. Under Adelaide's from 2008 in trust. Beatrix and Rowena stood behind the counter. Dr. Amberton stood in the doorway. His grandfather's photograph in his coat pocket. Wilma held the tin box. Mr. Kilbride was there. Wire-rimmed glasses on their thin black cord. The families were there. 83 of them so far. Descendants of the original 47. Elinor picked up her grandmother's fountain pen. She looked up at Silas. He nodded. She wrote. I, Elinor Prudence Hawthorne, on the 17th day of April, 2028, at the age of 24, under my own hand alone, undertake the promise of my great-great-grandmother Cordelia, and my grandmother Adelaide. So long as the Hawthorne Bakery stands on Hollow Ridge Road, no family in Hollowbrook County shall lack the bread and meal for their winter table for want of the cost of the baking. She signed her name. 5th generation. The room was silent. Then Dr. Amberton stepped forward. May I? Please. He picked up the pen. He wrote below Elinor's signature. Witness. Ezekiel Amberton. Grandson of Josiah Redmond. One of the 47. He set down the pen. Silas stepped forward. He picked up the pen. He wrote. Witness. Silas Redmond. Great-grandson of Josiah Redmond. Keeper of the fire. He set down the pen. He looked at Elinor. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. There is a thing about the trade our grandmothers teach us to keep. It is not a thing of the will. It is not a thing of the lawyer's cracked leather chair. It is not a thing of the cousins in their Charlottesville coats. The trade is the hand that learned. The hand that teaches. The hand that comes after. And sometimes the trade is 6 warm loaves cooling on an oak rack at 11:29 on the morning of the 15th of October. In a small stone bakery. That everyone in the county believed had been closed for 5 years. Baked by a young man, who slept in a shed for a year, and then in a farmhouse for 4 more. Because a woman he had loved had asked him to. Because his great-grandfather had been one of 47 cabins. Because a promise had come back around. We do not always know what has been baking in the ovens of the abandoned bakeries. We do not always know that somebody has been kneading dough at 4 in the morning for us. That somebody has been writing us letters they will never mail. That somebody has been baking us loaves they will give to strangers, so that even if the loaf never reaches us, some part of the love does. But it does. Adelaide Hawthorne baked 1,825 loaves for a granddaughter she was not allowed to touch. And in the end, every one of those loaves reached her. Because Elinor Hawthorne came home. Because she found 6 warm loaves on a counter. Because she took the key her grandmother had left, with a lawyer for 17 years. Because she read the letters. Because she trusted the young man. Because she opened the brick. Because she signed her name. Because she wrote her own letter every Sunday, for the rest of her life. The bread was still warm on the morning of October 15th, 2025. Because someone had been baking it for her. Every morning. For 5 years. Waiting. Just waiting. For her to come home.